Okay, morning. This is just a quick review of what I hoped would be clear from the lesson plan. Let's make sure we just can review this. This page should hopefully have made sense. This is the one thing I want to make sure that I talk about is make sure you save your bitmap files to your network drive for credit and to follow the naming conventions. So I'll go through that at the end. I'll show you some samples from yesterday and we'll see how well that got interpreted. So in our 3ds Max modeling tutorials, hopefully before you even came in yesterday you had a lot of these done. And did you guys have any questions about what these involved so far? So maybe you came back and need to pick up with lighting or rendering. And so I wanted you to follow the standard tutorials, but the difference is I want everyone's to kind of show their own touch. And so there's a number of things that I want to have you actually change. And I'll review those with you and make sure you know how to do it. And we'll continue to make that change as we model moving forward. So here's what we're talking about is if everyone just did the standard, they'd all look the same. And consistency is great if you're literally doing a cookie cutter approach and you're already manufacturing the same thing over and over to a standard. In this instance though, you're doing kind of a one of a kind, and so I want to make sure whether you're doing a model, you put your own touch. In code, the variable names, your comments, there's a lot of things where you can express yourself, and you'll make it more interesting and more meaningful to you by taking the time to do that. Of course, with the recent release of Star Wars, show of hands, how many people saw the latest version? Anybody in this session? Okay. So there were some scenes where they had crowds of stormtroopers that looked pretty much all the same, and it almost had kind of a Third Reich or a North Korea feel with the troops all lined up looking like they're in uniform there. And yet you could maybe build one of those, and you saw some others that were differentiated. They may have had a shoulder cap on them or something that was a little bit different. And so what I want you to explore here as you're doing your work is to be creative. And creativity has a number of benefits to it. There is a common belief, and you can find references to it on the internet, that the Amish always put a flaw in their quilt because they believe seeking perfection would be an insult to God, for example. That may or may not be true with the Amish people because they don't necessarily post on the internet. But I think if you take a look at hand-drawn work or hand-done work, you're going to find flaws in it, and that makes it yours. So this would be an example of a rendered scene. It's been modeled and textured, which might be the thing that we're really after here. But somewhere in the scene, add your logo, add your name. We could add a billboard very easily here that has a student's logo on it. And by making it your own, then we can tell who did the work just by looking at it. We should also have some kind of a background and or base to show off your model, so it's not just hanging out in 3D space with nothing going on. And then if there is a camera in the scene, it doesn't need to be kept at the defaults. It's actually nice if you play with either the focal length. You know what focal length is? Okay, so make it so you can actually see more, a wider view, or less, like a sniper scope view of your scene. You can pan, rotate. You can move things around so that it's not the default camera. So one of the examples I was going to highlight is that when you were given the assignment of doing the complex shape, I asked you to do some of those elements in it, and when I reviewed the work, there were some pretty unique takes on it. There was a variety of elements that people were expressing their work. Many people put their name in. I don't necessarily remember seeing any logos, and some of them were rather subtle. For example, the little mouse in this almost cheese-like assembly up here was kind of an individual's way of expressing themselves with this work. So not only were the instructions followed, and are there variations within them, and they're not cookie cutter, but you can tell by looking at the work their choice of materials and or colors, lighting, the appropriate backgrounds in many of the scenes. And so these are all the same work, but express the students' individual tastes in different ways. In the lighting tutorial, there's a number of opportunities for you to put your name in, and a lot of people were actually using the pool either to put floaties in it or maybe floating ice, to put some neon text, almost like a tavern sign. And there's more than one render for the lighting. There's one where the sun is high in the sky and the shadows are almost directly below the furnishings on the deck. There's another one where there's a shadow cast from a sun at a different angle, and rather than being straight down, it's a little bit more of an angle. And there's a sunset, and there's even a nighttime scene. There's another part of this where you see a rendition looking out from a window onto this scene, and there's a painting on the right. Some people have actually modified the texture by putting their signature on it. Other people have put their logo there. And so some way of expressing yourself. So when you're done with the work, I should be able to look on the network drive, and I should look for all of the bitmap files that have a date modified for yesterday. And I should be able to tell by looking at the file name, the description. For example, something like Light 1, your first and last initial, and a number. So for example, it would be Light 1 and then AW for Andrew Wooten with a 1.bmp. I don't want to see the 3ds Max files up front. I just want to see the result of your work in the same format that you would want to be able to put it up on an online portfolio, include it in a PowerPoint, or show off your work. So I will be reviewing it to make sure you've actually done the geometry and the modifiers. I do want to see materials applied because we've gone through that part. And most of these are going to have either a backdrop, base, or ground, some kind of Virtual Studio pre-built, but if needed, add those. And then the scene should have a camera. And the benefit of a camera is if you don't render from a camera, you close the file or move off of that particular view that you were working with, it's hard to reproduce the exact orientation of the scene. And then somewhere identify yourself in the actual work. That'll give me actually three clues. I can look at the date and timestamp and know this happened between 8:20 and 10:20. It's a first session student. The second clue I'll have is there's the initials there. So if it's AW, it's probably Andrew Wooten. And if I look inside of it, I might see his logo, I might see his name there. So not to pick on you, Andrew, I just happened to look up and see you when I was choosing a student name there. And so with all of that, in addition, it's great to see you apply the concepts that are in the tutorial and moving forward continue to use them. So let's see if do you guys have questions on what I'm looking for there? So let me show you what I came in to find. This is a search of all the student drives, and if I looked at like one of these, let's see if I can open this with Paint just so it's quick, and I zoomed in, I can see that the student actually modified and put their initials on the hood of the Jeep. So it's a pretty clear indicator that they actually modified this and did their own work on it. This particular background does not have a bump map on it, which would make it look more 3D rather than just spray painted over flat. Once you've learned how to do that, it would be great for you to incorporate that. So here's a number of scenes that did not necessarily have any clear indication of the name. So that's where I wanted to touch base and repeat. Oh, that's an interesting one. I haven't looked through all of these, so this is a discovery in process here. It looks like they added a reflective material here, and they got rid of the sofa. So there's, in essence, a mirror surface here. And so from the camera's viewport, we're actually seeing a reflection of what's outside on the terrace. I don't, however, offhand see where they added their name. So that's my challenge, is trying to make sure that you've understood how I want you to interpret. These look like some custom angles here. These names are there, but they're not necessarily just built into the scene, and it may be something that some people are more comfortable and more adept at than others. If you make it more subtle but still apparent, I think there'll be a benefit to it. The shadow study, by the way, I'll talk about that a little bit later because there's a great industry application of that outside of the games programming field that would be good for you to understand. So if I looked at the total number of files here, I don't believe every student saved a bitmap out properly. So I would like you to kind of reflect upon the rubric now that you maybe understand it better. I'll encourage you to ask for help if you're not sure. And that's funny, Brian. We'll have to make sure everybody gets a chance to get their work turned in. Did that make more sense than the handout? Okay, yeah. All right, so let me get you guys back into work, and if you want to post something out there today, to actually indicate your work from yesterday, it shouldn't take that long, and you can put your text in there somewhere.